counsel Robert Mueller facing a deadline for deciding whether to retry Paul Manafort on a handful of charges on which jurors could not reach a unanimous decision. Now, federal prosecutors have until tomorrow to inform the judge of their decision. So will Mueller's team bother with a retrial? Let's discuss all this with Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law professor emeritus and the author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor Dershowitz, thank you for coming on the program this morning. So time is running out for Mueller. What ultimately does he decide to do here?
It's a no-brainer. Of course he's not going to try the hung jury counts for several reasons. Number one, he's going to get the same sentence. The judges can take into account charges on which there was a hung jury. Judges can even take into account charges in which there was an acquittal in sentencing. That's how open-ended the sentencing rules are. Second, he's going to want to hold these in abeyance in the event Manafort appeals and succeeds and reverses his conviction. They can then bring all the charges in a retrial. But right now, to retry would be a waste of the taxpayers' money, and I can't believe that he would actually move forward with a trial on those counts.
So it's fair to say, obviously, that a retrial would not benefit, of course, Manafort, but it wouldn't benefit Mueller to do this?
No, it wouldn't benefit anybody, and the losers would be the American public, as we in the end are paying for it. The only conceivable purpose it would have would be to add pressure to Manafort to flip and testify, and I think they probably have enough pressure on him now with the convictions in Virginia, and they certainly anticipate convictions in Washington as well, where they have a more favorable jury venue and a more favorable judge.
So it sounds like you're saying that he is unlikely to bother with that. Meanwhile, got to ask you about Lanny Davis. We've had a few conversations about him recently, representing Michael Cohen, who just entered into that guilty plea. He has now admitted that he was the anonymous source for this story on the Trump Tower meeting, and he's now sharing his regrets over his error, as he's calling it. Alan, what are your thoughts on all of this as it unfolds?
Well, Lanny is a friend of mine and a terrific lawyer, and it's commendable that he's admitted his mistake. Look, this is the problem that happens when you have a flipped witness who has an incentive not only to sing, but also to compose. And it may very well be that Cohen began to elaborate and embellish a little bit in an effort to get an even better deal. And Cohen may have told Lanny David these stories, and Lanny has now checked them out, and there's no corroboration for them. So he's performing a very important service and telling the public that, no, he withdraws that. He's walking it back, and you shouldn't presume that either the president knew about the meeting before it occurred or that the president knew about the hacking before it occurred. He's walked back both of those very serious accusations, and I think he acknowledges that they probably shouldn't have been made. There's probably a dynamic going on between the client and the lawyer that we'll never know about, but these kinds of things happen. I've had it happen in my experience where a client has told me something and I've doubted it, and I've done some checking, and sure enough, the client wasn't telling me the truth. He was trying to elaborate on the story to get a better deal, and I've forbidden the client from making public any of those statements. So lawyers ought to view with great skepticism stories that are told to them by clients who have been flipped and clients who have an incentive maybe to make their stories a little bit better.
You know, Governor Huckabee was on the program earlier. I don't have time to play the clip, but he suggested that a bit different than that this not only hurts the credibility of Lanny Davis, but also the credibility of his client.
It does. I know. I think it certainly hurts the credit. Well, we don't know, again, the dynamic. We don't know who told who. And maybe Lanny's falling on the sword for his client. So whenever there's a complicated issue like this, I want to withhold judgment because I don't know what the client told the lawyer, how the lawyer evaluated what the client said, and why the lawyer is now pulling back on it. But undoubtedly, it does affect the credibility of the Cohen team, but I think acknowledging the mistake helps bolster the credibility back just a little bit.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, thank you for coming on America's Newsroom this morning. Good to see you.
Thank you.